Tiaan, first off, I want to say thank you for joining us on the podcast today. How's everything going? It's been probably like a busy couple of months for you, right?
It certainly has. Yeah, the last 2 weeks have been pretty good though. I've managed to take some time off. So just been relaxing and taking it easy and recharging the batteries.
Okay, all right, cool. Obviously, so today's date, let me just double check. So September the 9th. So it is just under 2 weeks ago that the World Championships in Budapest ended. Um, your first major global championships. I know it's a point of contention in New Zealand sometimes how challenging it is to make those global championships.
Yeah.
You had a high standard to qualify and you made that. So tell us a little bit about your experience in Budapest and sort of did it live up to expectations or was it different to what you thought it might be?
Oh, it was amazing. I'll just kick off by saying that it was fantastic and it was probably one of the most fun experiences I think I've ever had in my life. So I was just real excited to go and compete and see and be able to rub shoulders with some of the greatest in the world, and rocking up and everything's sorted. You're in a nice hotel. There's good food. There's just athletes everywhere. The environment's good. Everyone's excited. Everyone's nervous. It was just amazing. Even just the days up to the competition and after the competition, it was just an awesome experience. But the day of competition itself was something out of a movie. It was incredible. I've never been in front of a crowd that big, and so definitely had to sort of stand there behind the blocks for a little bit and look around and just take it all in and try and soak up every moment. But it was utterly fantastic, and I cannot wait to do it again.
Okay, all right, cool. Paris within the next 12 months, right? Um,
That's the one.
Absolutely. So was it how was it sort of like lining up in terms of was it sort of like a nerve-wracking experience as well? I mean, I'm sure
Mm.
there must be like heaps of adrenaline flowing and all that kind of stuff.
Certainly, there's always a bit of nerves and there's always a lot of adrenaline. For me at least, more so leading up to the competition.
Mhm.
Once I'm on the track, once I'm getting ready, once I'm behind the blocks, I tend to zone in, I tend to focus. And I don't really feel too jittery, but I just feel like I'm ready to go. So certainly was a bit weird looking up and seeing all the people. Definitely kind of made me a little bit more nervous than I think I've been before, but just decided to look down at the track, look at the blocks, look at the start and the finish line, and realize that's all I have to do is go from here to there. So I've done that many times before. Just staying in my own lane, I guess, was the key to me.
Okay, all right, cool. And I guess like you raced, for example, in Japan earlier this year against like
Mm,
Fred, Curly, and so
mm.
in terms of yeah, I mean, essentially, he was the reigning world champion. He was the world champion
Yeah.
going into Budapest. So, you'd kind of raced as big as they come. So I guess sort of like rubbing shoulders with those guys wasn't necessarily something that was kind of like brand new to you.
No, certainly not. This season's been pretty chaotic for me. Mostly thanks to COVID and just previous injuries in the previous years. This is my first actual international season. Before this year, I'd not really run outside of New Zealand. So to go from, thinking one of the local classics is a big meet for me, and there's a decent crowd to jump into the next big thing. Oh, now I'm racing in Australia, and there's some big names from Japan here and some big Australian names, and then going, oh, this is the biggest thing I've ever done. And then from that, jump into Tokyo and going, okay, wow, this is by far the biggest thing I've ever done. And then it just kept scaling up and up, going to, all the meets in Europe. Some of those are real big, and eventually just finishing up at World Champs. So there was probably about 6 or 7 times I was sitting there telling myself, this next race is going to be the biggest race of my career so far. So it was really crazy to see just how quickly it progressed from, thinking what is a big deal to what is actually a big deal.
All right, fantastic. And I guess there's just one more rung up the ladder, which would be the Olympic Games, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And sort of thinking about that, a lot of lessons that kind of you learned through kind of, going up those steps that you mentioned just there.
Yeah, certainly. I've certainly learned quite a lot this year. I think the main thing for me this year, being that it was my first international season, was to have it a year to really just gain as much experience as I can,
Mhm.
do a lot of learning, do a lot of networking, make contacts, meet people. I often talk to Zoe Hobbs, the female sprinter in New Zealand,
Yeah.
and she's doing pretty fantastic at the moment, placed 10th at World Champs. And um, I feel like I'm maybe just 2 years sort of behind her, but on the same path. I look back 2 years, the first time she went to Europe, I think was in 2019,
Yeah.
actually. And I think her first world champ, she placed 39th, and so I placed 37th. So I feel like we're on a pretty similar trajectory. I remember she told me the first time you go overseas and the first time you compete, you rarely actually perform at the best of your capability, just because everything's so new and everything's so strange. But then when you go back next year, you know where everything is, you know what to do, you know how to acclimate better, you know the little tips and tricks, sorry, in terms of like having ear muffs or earplugs and, something to cover your eyes, or blocking blue light, or whatever it may be, to reduce jet lag and to make sure that you can perform even when you're sleeping in a weird bed. Do you bring your pillow with you? It's all a learning experience. And I certainly think that the next time I head over to Europe, I'll certainly be a lot more accustomed and ready to actually perform at the top of my capability while I'm over there.
All right. Okay, cool. I'm looking forward to obviously seeing how 2024 kind of kicks off for you. So you said you've had like a couple of weeks to sort of relax since you got back from Budapest. When does the preparation for next season start? I'm guessing
tomorrow.
Oh, right. Okay,
Yeah,
I was going to say fairly soon, right? Tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm normally the kind of person that just, especially being a Southern Hemisphere athlete as well, it
Yeah.
never really stops for us. So
Yeah.
I basically have to start preparing now, because our season kicks off in December. So can't take too much off. I can't take off until November, because then I'll have a month to get ready. So I was planning, I normally do this thing where I just get straight back into it. Maybe I'll take 2 or 3 days off. First thing I was saying was, maybe I'll take 3-4 days, and I want to get back in the gym. I want to start moving, because I'm so motivated and so ready to start training for this next cycle. And having experienced everything I did at Budapest, I think I'm more motivated than ever. But having spoken to my sports psych, he recommended, mate, take at least 1 to 2 weeks off, because I'm sure you're very motivated and you'll get back and get into it, but then you'll probably burn out real quick. So then I was like, yeah, I'll take a week off. And then a week passed and I was like, I'm still a bit jet lagged. I should take another week off. So here we are now. I'm feeling ready to go. I'm itching to get going again. I've been bored the last 3 to 4 days with no training and stuff. So I'm just excited to get back into the gym, probably ease into it a little bit, but man, I'm just ready to work on what I know I need to work on and get ready for next year.
All right, mate. That's really exciting. And I think that it's interesting what you were saying there. I sometimes think that the role of sort of like an athlete support unit is to hold them back.
Yes,
Sometimes as
100%.
much as it is to kind of motivate them, sometimes it's to just sort of restrain that motivation a little bit, so you can basically just so it's sustainable. Because as you were saying there, if you kind of go in all guns blazing early September, by the time we get to next July, there's obviously the risk of burnout, like you said. So
100%. Couldn't agree more.
So I want to sort of like touch on your childhood, and I know we spoke about this a while ago, because I believe that you said you spent some time around Buckingham in the UK, which is very close to where I grew up, really. And so correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but you were born in South Africa?
Yes, that's true.
Did spend some time growing up in the UK, and lived in New Zealand for a little while now. So how old were you when you kind of made those moves from South Africa to the UK, and then UK down to to New Zealand?
Well, so we actually did a bit of a loop first. It's really annoyingly overcomplicated, but what we did was when I was probably around 10, we moved from South Africa to New Zealand for the first time.
Right.
The intention behind that move was, let's get out of South Africa, let's go somewhere safer, somewhere better, somewhere where there's more of a future. We'd had other friends that had moved to New Zealand, and we was thinking, it's a good place, it's stunning. We went to go check it out. We got our permanent residency visas. Mom got a job as a teacher, so we're like, sweet, yep, off to New Zealand, there we go. Dad kept his job, however. He works in the wine industry, and he was working for a pretty big winery that's mostly based out of America, but also based out of the UK. And he was managing sort of the African territories, Africa and the Middle East. And so we were in New Zealand, and he was working remotely, which was a bit tough for him, because obviously flying from New Zealand to the UK and to Africa it's quite a trek and quite a lot of jet lag. So we were in New Zealand for about 2 years, loving it. And then the earthquakes happened, and we were in Christchurch for those earthquakes. So we were here for the whole thing, experienced all of it. And then, Dad's company basically hit him up and said, well, mate, things are looking a bit uncertain over there where you are now in Christchurch. We'd be happy to relocate you to the UK. We'd organize school for your kids, a house, a car, everything you'd need. So it seemed like a no-brainer to my parents. So next thing I knew, off we were to the UK. So yeah, first it was South Africa, then New Zealand, then the UK. And then we were actually based in Buckinghamshire for most of the time. We were about there for 3 years. First of living in Gerrard's Cross. And then we moved from there to High Wycombe, because I went to the Royal Grammar School for a couple of years.
My uncle went there. There you go. Small world.
Great school. Yeah, no, it was good. It's good. Missed the sun a little bit while I was over there. It just tends to
Yeah, I
rain quite a lot. But
bet.
no, it was good. We liked it there, but we never really loved it.
Mhm.
And so we kind of got to the point where we were deciding, we'd be pretty keen to either move back to New Zealand or move to South Africa. And upon my parents' recommendation, they were saying, I think it would be best for you to go do high school in South Africa. The big fan of the schooling system over there. I'm also now a very big fan of the schooling system. I can vouch for it. It's pretty fantastic over there, just the culture and pride and everything that you've got in the schools over there. So yeah, we moved from England back to South Africa in 2014, late 2014,
Mhm.
just in time for me to come into high school in grade 8 or year 9.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, finished my high school career there, but the intention was always to move back out of South Africa. We weren't planning on staying there the whole time. So when I finished high school, I applied to some universities in South Africa, but they've got all sorts of tricky quota systems and things there. And so things weren't looking too great. And we decided, well, we've still got our permanent residency, so why not just move back to New Zealand? So that's what we ended up doing. So back to New Zealand in 2018. So the loop goes from South Africa to New Zealand, to the UK, back to South Africa, back to New Zealand. So just a bit of a loop, just at a lap or two. So no, it's
Okay.
good, but it's been back here now for since 2018, late 2018. Yeah.
Okay. No more moves on the horizon.
Not for me, no.
Yeah.
Well, who knows? You
Never
never
say
cross it
never.
out. But
Yeah.
I'd be pretty happy. I have been pretty happy just to stay in one place for a while, considering we move around just so much as I was growing up. Even when we were living in South Africa, the first 10 years of our life, we tended to move around quite a lot. So for me to have a good base and to feel comfortable, and you make friends and you want to
Mhm.
stay around, it's been pretty good the last 4 or 5 years just to feel like I've got a bit of a, I'm touching the ground. I've
Yeah.
got a bit of a base. So, but I won't rule out the possibility of moving. I didn't think I'd ever move again, but now with my sport, sometimes you've got to do what's best for you. And if that's not here, then maybe, I could consider moving to Australia, or I'm currently even looking at joining a sprint training group back in South Africa for a few months. So there's
Okay.
lots of possibilities on the horizon for me. And I don't want to cross any of them out, because at the end of the day, I'm still young. I'm 23. So I can easily go somewhere and come back, and I should just do whatever's going to be best for my sport at the moment, go out and live it and enjoy it. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, sounds good. Sounds but very exciting. I'm quite a big proponent of travel as well.
Mm.
But I just think that, yeah, exactly as you said, sport can take you. I mean, especially at your level, I imagine, it provides with its sort of travel opportunities and,
Yeah.
setting yourself up in the best situation to perform at your best. Obviously, that's got to be that's got to take priority. And especially kind of this year is obviously kind of going to be a big year with Paris on the
Oh,
horizon, and
definitely. Yeah.
yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to guess that you had some involvement with rugby. Just that you were
Yep.
growing up between those three countries.
Mm.
Were there any other sports that you played whilst you were growing up?
While I was growing up, I pretty much tried and tested every sport I could get my hands on, to be honest with you, especially sort of in primary school and even a little bit in high school. But was always mostly a rugby boy. I think Dad thought he was coaching up the next Springbok. That was the goal. So yeah, it was pretty hard on the rugby all throughout primary and high school even. There's probably, played here in New Zealand, and then when we moved over to the UK, I started taking things a little bit more seriously. I managed to work my way into the Wasps Academy over there.
Okay.
And from that, actually also managed to get up into what was called the England Elite Development Group, which was just a sort of small elite group where they'd be basically trying to train up the next sort of England team or whatever. This is, keep in mind, 12, 13-year-olds, so not super serious, but
Yeah.
sort of a small elite group that you had to sort of earn your way into it. So I was definitely taking the rugby pretty seriously. And it was probably mostly my main sport. Was always doing a bit of track on the side. It's just, you can balance a summer and a winter sport easy enough when you're a youngster.
Mm-hmm.
And I was pretty good. I was always kind of fast, especially through primary school, and actually did mostly long jump through primary school. I was pretty good at that.
Okay.
I have vivid memories of going to the South African finals when I was 10 years old for some primary long jump competition. It was good
Okay.
fun. But yeah, then what happened was, when kids are 12, 13, 14 around this, all of a sudden some of them just start growing. Everyone hits puberty at a different time, and I hit it particularly late. So by the time I was 15, 16, around there. Everyone else was a head taller than me, much bigger, much stronger. All of a sudden I went from being, one of the fastest kids to not even being able to make the relay team, was just
Right.
getting left in the dust. So, and I wanted to stay involved in track and field. So I sort of decided to broaden my horizons a bit and actually started to specialize more in long and triple jump especially. This would have been during my early high school career in South Africa,
Okay.
all the while still playing rugby in the winter. And at this point in time, I was in Polrus, which is one of the probably top 5 biggest rugby schools on the planet, to be honest with you. So very big rugby heritage over there and very big rugby school. And I'd managed to work my way up into the sort of AB squad, under 16s, sort of tracking towards playing for the first team in a couple of years. And yeah, then I had some injuries that set me back. I tore a growth plate off my hip running a relay race the one day, and that pretty much put me out for 8 months or so. And then by the time I came back, I'd grown a little bit. I was a bit taller, but I wasn't quite there yet. And the rugby boys told me, well, listen, you've been away for so long, you'll have to work your way back up through the teams now. And I just decided, I'll try. And so I started down, and keep in mind, big rugby school, the teams went all the way down to J.
Right.
So
Okay, half the alphabet.
quickly worked my way back up from J through to the B team, I think, or something. And then it was off to, the next year, which would have been first team, because first team's off, under 18s and under 17s over there. So in this point in time, I started doing a bit more track and field, and I was getting real fast again. Did pretty well in the triple jump that year. I think I almost made it to the South African, the nationals, but didn't quite make it. I was jumping around 13, mid 14 meters as a 16, 17-year-old with the worst technique you'll ever see. It's embarrassing. But
I want to source a video
fun.
of that now.
Yeah, I'll get you a video of that. It's basically I'll show you a video of the personal best that I jumped was 1450, and it's like a 6 meter hop, like 1.5 meter step, and then just like another 6 meter jump. So it was terrible, but I ended up doing pretty well. I think I came 4th in my final year in high school at the South African National Finals, and that's also the year I came 5th in the 100 meter at the South African National Finals, and that was my first actual year of competing properly in the 100 meters. I think I had one inter-school, so we have our little inter-house, actually, not even inter-school. So it was literally just our school's competition between the houses in the school. I vividly remember everyone thinking, it was either going to be Caleb or Remy that was going to win. Remy was our first team winger, and Caleb had been a sprinter sort of, all throughout high school, and everyone was saying, one of those two is going to win. And I just came out of nowhere and whipped them both. So from then on out, everyone was like, you're pretty quick. We should focus on sprint training. And yeah, we started to lean into it a little bit more with the coach I had over there. His name's Greg. And ended up making it pretty far that year in 2018. I managed to run a 10.6 at the age of 18 at altitude in Potchefstroom. So definitely a bit easier to run over there, but nonetheless, still a decent achievement. I think I ran a 10.7 high at sea level in Cape Town the same year. So was definitely starting to track pretty well. Back then, my goal was just to beat my dad's personal best, which was 10.7 something as well. So was pretty happy to get under that. And then, yeah, once school finished, we were off to New Zealand, and decided to carry on with the career, see what I could do with it, see what I could train myself up to. And if it could, open doors for me and things, if it could help me fast track my New Zealand passport, which it ended up doing, then that would be a great success. So, yeah.
So was it pretty much a case that once you got to New Zealand, you essentially started training full time?
Not initially, no. So I was very keen to carry on with training, but at this time I wasn't quite, at a super elite level. I was just sort of, I was decently quick. And I'd sort of looked over at the New Zealand rankings before I'd moved and thought I could be a pretty good top 10 contender in the country there. And so I was pretty keen to keep doing it just because I enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed the social aspect. The friends and the people you meet through the sport are always fantastic. And so I initially came over and joined a coach here, Terry Lomax, who actually coaches Hamish Kerr, our really good high jumper, initially to do triple jump. And so the first year I was here as well, I was doing triple jump and 100 meters. And eventually Terry sort of passed me on to the sprints coach, because I kind of realized you should be focusing more on running and less on jumping, because that's probably where most of your potential and talent lies. And that would have been probably 2019 that I started to more and more focus on the shorter sprints. And that same year managed to win the under 20 national final in New Zealand in the 100 meters. So from then on out, I don't think I ever looked back. I think I knew exactly what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. So, you mentioned at some point that you're kind of talking about injuries, and as an outsider looking in, I felt like in 2021 you're on the verge of running very fast.
Certainly, yeah.
And I remember the injury. I think it was your hamstring against
Yes, yeah.
Eddie at the Nationals, and maybe we'd have seen a little bit more of what we saw in 2023.
Absolutely,
Sorry,
yeah.
2022 that was. I think I'm getting
Yeah.
my
Well, no, you're right, because I did my hammy in 2021 and 2022, so there was there was yeah, it
right.
happened
Okay.
twice. So you're not wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
The race that I'm thinking of, though, I think was the
It was
2022
the
Nationals,
national
in
final, yeah.
where I think you were sort of slightly ahead of him in the final,
Yes.
pulled your
Yeah.
hamstring,
Yeah.
and obviously Eddie went on to run a national record at
That
the
same year, yes, yeah.
in
In
Eugene, right?
Oregon,
Yeah.
in the heats, I believe, yeah.
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 Yeah. So I feel like, if it wasn't for that, perhaps we'd have been seeing a little bit more of what we saw this year. We might have seen a little bit more of that last year. Is that sort of like a fair comment?
Definitely. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Couldn't agree more. I've always thought, people are looking at me now like I've sort of popped out of nowhere, which
Mm-hmm.
in fairness, I kind of have, because, being the first international season, where's this guy come from and why is
Mm-hmm.
he winning comps in Australia? And now where have you come from? But I've always, the past sort of 2-3 years, I've been tracking pretty well. I've just been
Yeah.
unlucky with injuries and conditions and things. So 2021, was also tracking real well. I managed to bring my PB down to a 10.3 something in 2021. I think it was 10.31.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, one of the last competitions of the season, the hammy just went. And then it was straight into rebuilding, getting ready for the next season. And for 2022, my goal was very much to sort of try and track towards Com Games World Champs. And I was doing fairly well in that regard. But then, yeah, as you mentioned, in the national 100-meter final, hammy went again. And I pretty much knew my season would be over there, because those would have been the points that I would have needed to break into the
Right.
international stage. And obviously the Australian season's kind of just after the New Zealand season, so I didn't get to do any of that either last year.
Mm-hmm.
But I always knew I'd come back, and every time I've come back stronger and quicker. So I think I got straight back into it, and I sort of looked at it as an advantage, because I was thinking, well, these people are, over messing around in Europe and stuff. I'm just here and I'm in the gym and I'm working hard and I'm getting a head start on these guys, building my foundation and strength for the next year. And so things were tracking and looking real well in 2022, sort of late 2022. I started smashing my PBs, on the hill sprints and in our shorter courses and things, and lifting tremendous amounts of weights. I think I brought my power clean PB up to like 155. I was just starting to track really, really well, and I was getting really excited for the next season for 2023. I thought this was going to be a good season, and as it so turned out, it was.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you're kind of mentioning the gym there, and this was actually going to be my next question, but I'm just going to bring it back here because it segued quite nicely into it. So obviously you've given us your clean number there, 155 kilos, which people that are in the States, that's got to be 350
I think it's 340
pounds ish, 340. Yeah. Okay. And so you're clearly quite strong. Some of the stuff I've seen you do with the trap bar on Instagram, assuming they're legitimate plates, it looks pretty strong as well.
Yes, yeah, definitely legitimate plates.
How important is the gym for you in terms of translating to the performance on the track?
Pretty important. I'd say the gym is my bread and butter.
Okay.
My strength and my power is definitely my sort of natural freakish talent that I was born with.
Mm-hmm.
I would be surprised if there was another sprinter ranked somewhere above me that could push out, more power and more watts and more weight. Maybe there is, I don't know. But it's definitely my strong point, is just being freakishly strong and freakishly powerful and explosive. So the gym, although it's important for me, is actually something that I'm trying to focus a bit less on now, because I don't think getting to 180 kilogram clean is really going to make me much quicker. The things that are going to make me quicker now are working on my sort of reactive strength and my stiffness, lower leg stiffness, fascia stiffness, tendon stiffness.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens, and I'm sure you've seen this in my races, I'm sure you saw this in Tokyo when I was racing against Fred, I'm really good over my first 60, which is funny because I'm a tall guy, I'm 6'5". But I was toe to toe with old mate Fred for probably the first 40 meters.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just, picks up and he starts bouncing, and I just keep mushing into the floor and run pretty, not very efficiently. And so good over the first 60, not too good over the last 40. So that's my work point. That's what I feel like I need to work on in order to be able to really break into that next sort of territory of times where I'm running low 10s or under 10s. It's going to be, the gains are going to be made in that last half of the race, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think obviously, there's a closer correlation between max strength and acceleration performance as opposed to max speed, like you've said. But obviously, like your height, for example, it doesn't. You tend to see people that might be. I mean, you're very tall for a 100-meter sprinter anyway. But it tends to be that people that are sort of like 6 foot or plus. And this is a very, very broad categorization, but they tend to be stronger later on in the race, and people that are maybe shorter than that tend to be better at the acceleration. But the other thing that jumps out is that you're power cleaning 155 kilos, and you're probably lifting it. You might get a 5'9", 5'10" sprinter that's power cleaning 155 kilos, but you've got to take that bar 6-7 inches further in order to get underneath it.
Yeah, it certainly makes it a lot trickier.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, it makes those gym numbers all that much more impressive.
And there's certainly a lot more gym numbers I can throw at you if you like the gym numbers. In terms of where I really shine is not just in resistance, but in just raw power generation. So power being a component of resistance and speed. Something like a Kaiser squat. I'm sure you're familiar with the Kaiser squat. I've pushed out, I think the best I've done is 5,650 watts at 290 kilograms. So that's just my bread and butter. It's just what I'm good at. Generating power. I think I've done close to 2,700 on the watt bike. So it's just where my strengths lie. And I'm not saying that I should not keep developing that. I think I absolutely can, because I tend to develop that quite well. But like my coaches have told me, it's all good lifting stuff up and down in the gym, but at the end of the day, we're trying to move forward. So we've got to work on the things, my weaknesses, I think, to really get to that next level. But I do love the gym. It's probably my favorite stuff to do. I just enjoy it. It's what I'm good at. So why would not enjoy it,
Absolutely makes sense. And I seem to remember on your Instagram story, wasn't it? Was it in Montpellier at your
yes,
in your holding camp where you had like some of the Kaiser equipment, access to it there?
Yes. Yeah. So there in Leuven, where I was based in Europe, they also had that was my first time actually using Kaiser machines. I've always wanted to use them. I've always been fascinated by them. For me, I love the idea of chasing a power number instead of just a resistance number. So it's one thing to say that, I can clean 160 kilograms or whatever, but how quickly can you clean 120? I feel like that's probably more relevant for us in the sport that we're in, is how quickly you can move things instead of how heavy you can move things. Because once you tend to get real heavy, what's the point of deadlifting 300 kilograms? It's just going to be a slow movement, isn't it? Sure, it means you're real strong, but at the end of the day, we're trying to move a lot quicker than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that Randy Huntington, who kind of did a bit of work with Bin Jiangsu before the Tokyo 2021 games, he's a big, I think he used to work for Kaiser, in fact, but I think, he's a very big advocate of using, like you say, stuff that kind of gives you equipment that kind of gives you like a numerical output that's not simply the amount of force or mass that you're moving. It's it's got some like time component to it as well.
I think what often happens with us is, humans inherently are lazy creatures. And so if I have on my program that I've got to do 3 times 2 cleans of 120 kilograms, I'm going to walk up to the bar and my brain's only going to tell me to use as many muscle fibers as it needs to lift up that 120 kilograms. And I'm going to get through my reps, but I'm not really going to be pushing myself. Whereas if you attach, one of those VMAX things on the bar, and now all of a sudden I'm chasing a speed, now I'm pushing myself more, recruiting more muscle fibers and getting more of a sort of neural stimulus as well while I'm doing my workout, just because I'm trying to get a high number. I think athletes are so simple. We're all competitive, right? You walk into the arcade and you see one of those punching machines and you just want to see how high a number you can get. It's just how we work. So I think
intents are powerful. It's a powerful tool.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for me, it's a big thing. I love chasing numbers. I love chasing personal bests in the gym. So for me to be able to do that with power numbers, especially on the Kaiser, where it just spits it out right away, I was just in heaven. I loved it. Every time I was going to the gym, I was trying to beat my best. I was trying to do better. I was trying to get a higher number. And at the end of the day, that's going to be the best training, because you're not just churning away through your reps, not being present, not being there in your head. You're
Mhm.
really thinking and really trying every time you do it, which I think is very important.